Yoo-hoo! It's the time for package from China. Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's awesome that you're tuning in. So in today's video, we're going to be having a package from China with the RG35XX Pro. That's a mouthful. So the thing is, when it comes to these devices, is that, man, they are releasing so many of these devices. In the end, what you're getting is more like a minor revision of the previous one. So the RG35XX Pro, and the question remains, what is actually pro about this thing? The display that they're using is a 3.5-inch IPS panel, resolution of 640 by 480, having a maximum of 512 GB of storage capacity. The communication can be done by Wi-Fi or Bluetooth 4.2. Battery life 3200 mAh, that gives us around 7 hours of gaming time, and we're going to be needing to charge with a 5V 1.5 amp minimum. So the CPU is an H700 quad core that we have seen with different models, and having a RAM of 1 GB LPDDR4. Enough power to run most of the stuff, but let's deep dive into some emulation and what we can do with the menu. Color wise, nothing really fancy. We're having the white, black and the transparent teal version, and that's the one I'm getting over here, and it looks kind of cool when it comes to, they say, the idea. So previously we have sometimes the specification on the box, but there is nothing much going on over here. So actually, like Anbernic is, I think, at this moment the king of the releases of different handhelds, and with this new edition. So this is Pro, yeah, and actually when you're going to be later on looking into the specification, there's nothing Pro about it when it comes to that. But let's do a quick overview of the device. So first of all, I really love the color. I love this new, how do you call it, transparent teal? Or I will just call it green. I do like this, and I don't know if they're going to be releasing different colors like the retro version with the gray and the old school buttons. So configuration wise, the ABXY buttons, and I always find it interesting to see that they sometimes switch it out to having the AB over here, or this is something that happens sometimes with some of these devices. So when it comes to the Pro version, or at least this new edition, we do have two joysticks, where previous models only had a D-pad or one single joystick. So personally, I'm a D-pad, let's say, fetish guy, so I'm not going to be having anything going on with the, let's say, the joysticks. They're just the typical joysticks, not like the halo effect or whatever. And I must say, when it comes to, let's say, the style, it's similar to the Nintendo Switch first generation, but you can see with a very short travel, we do have the click underneath. So when it comes to the D-pad itself, yeah, and this is one of the things that I always have like a hate-and-love relation with some of these devices. So there's like a long travel D-pad, not the micro switch thing that we have seen before. And the feedback itself is quite pleasant. Only later on we're going to be checking out with some finding games if we can actually play them, but the feel itself is very positive. The ABXY button, I always love, like the thumb test. We're going to be like doing this movement, and you can just feel how pleasant they are. I mean, particularly when it comes to, let's say, the travel, where they are like a long travel, I love the shape of it, and it feels quite nice. Underneath they went for a single speaker, and this one sounds okay. So over here we're having the side left and right for the SD card. Now we have the configuration that we're having over here, the SD card with this particular model. Let's see. Ooh, yeah, that isn't a bad thing. So they're using these very strange non-brand SD cards. Yeah, it's highly possible they get corrupted in the future. So I would always back up and replace them with SanDisk, Samsung, or some other brands. We're having physical volume over here. I'm very glad they keep doing this, because I can still remember, like with some of the generation, we had like the combination of pressing select and having all kinds of crazy combinations. Having the reset and the on and off switch, we can power it on fairly easy by holding the button for a couple of seconds. Charging, yep, it's going to be done at the top over here. What I love also about this new generation of Anbernic devices, come with a built-in mini HDMI, so we can plug this thing inside. Like, you can just plug this thing into a monitor or a television, and a headphone jack out. So that's actually the grand tour of the device itself. It's translucent, so we can actually see what's going on. We do have a rumble function. And yeah, we cannot really easily like remove the battery, need to open it up, but it is easily done by removing a couple of, let's say, screws over here. But let's do a little bit of a chit chat about the software itself, because this is something we've seen many times before. But software wise, it's kind of interesting, but also kind of weird. They went for the original software, and this thing has some issue with the delay for PlayStation 1, I can still remember. However, having over here the game rooms are absolutely, yeah, just separate emulators. So every, let's say list you see, like PlayStation 1 have their own emulator. So over here having the arcade stuff that have their own emulator. And of course, yeah, we have all kinds of different emulators for every single platform. But what I wanted to say is, like with the Retro Arch game, or the RA, actually what we're going to be having over here is the same situation with more emulator support. Here having N64, but now everything will go through the RetroArch platform. So that's actually the difference. I found it interesting. So if you want to have like overall better performance with some of the emulators, I've noticed that also different features. So we're having over here the ports with some old school Quake, Wolfenstein 3D. So yeah, actually we're having two kind of emulators where you can see over here. So let's say we're having portable PlayStation 1 here, but also we're having over here the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation Portable. Yeah, so that's actually, you can just mess around with it, but later on I would not, let's say, be surprised if they're going to be having a completely different layout with different kind of firmware that runs everything way better. What this thing does utilize, at least having the app sender, music, video, ebook, file manager, and some other stuff. And I do want to let me know in the comments, do you actually use this? Because I've never using. So with the video, you can get into the SD card, you can boot up a video like this particular one over here. You can just have the preview. What is kind of interesting is that if you're going to be closing this, what you need to do is pressing the middle button over here, close the app, because you're actually going to be booting up an app. Here you can see it exiting, going back to the main menu. So a little bit more hassle, but you can actually, the procedures were working quite well. So over here having the favorite list, that is one of the things I find convenient, having over here the list that I have been playing before. And we can even do search. So let's say if we're going to be searching for some Sonic in my case, I love Sonic. So let's say we're going to be having Sonic and there is no Sonic. Why is there no freaking Sonic on here? That's absolutely... Why is there no Sonic? Wow, okay, that's really bad. However, so let's see, we're searching for S. Okay, let's search for S. Okay, we do have like the overall Assault. Okay, this is kind of weird, so I do wonder if this is going to be, no, this is not going to be working great. Settings, system information. In here we can find all of the versions and everything else, how much space we're still having left. Let's see how many CPU cores and etc. So nothing much going on over here. So the brightness level is quite nice. You can just see how bright this freaking thing goes. Going to be leaving it on 5 for now. And yeah, even having the RetroArch settings, if you mess around with RetroArch itself, you have some problems. So when it comes to configuration wise, but everything, the menu itself works quite nice. It's quite obvious how everything works. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having better software on this. And also it's going to be having overall better performance throughout the game's emulators. I want to show something about the quick menu. So having the game rooms and the game rooms, personally I really love this menu. So we're going to be booting up a game itself with the game rooms. If you're going to be pressing the tiny button in the middle, that will give you the quick menu. When pressing this over here, here we're having all kinds of cool options. We can CD control, we're having BIOS, you can mess around with that. And also do like a little bit, just messing around with the rumble function. We can put a video display effect. I'm almost putting it on fast because this means that we're going to be having the original, and it like reduces sometimes the other problems like a lag maybe. However, when you're going to be getting into this, you can make a quick load, quick save, and you just easily go back to the game itself. But when we're going to be getting into the RetroArch, we're going to be also having a different quick menu. So we're having the same kind of, let's say, game, but you can see already getting a different message over here. But with the RetroArch, we're also going to be having a different menu because we're going to be using RetroArch. Let me know in the comments what you think of the menu. I personally really prefer the first one because it's super convenient, make a quick load, quick save. That also is utilized over here, but this is just looking a little bit less, let's say, fancy when it comes to the RetroArch menu. But let's start off with some PlayStation 1 emulation. I think it's just absolutely great that we have like low budget devices that can emulate on native resolution without any problem. But even implementing some fast, let's say, settings, you will see there is an audio delay with this. It's quite unfortunate. The rumble function is indeed active. If you're going to be enable this with this particular menu, I think it's kind of a little bit of a bummer that when it comes to this particular emulator, I think the overall performance is quite good, but it's just that weird audio delay. You don't really notice it now maybe, but if you're going to be playing some fighting games like Tekken, you will actually notice. So first of all, if you're going to be doing a quick load and quick save, let's see if we can choose a quick load, quick save. This is one of the things I love about this, like this particular menu. We're just having a screenshot over here. So let's say if you're going to be just going through the game, then we're going to be loading up. So let's say we're going to be parking the car over here. Then we're going to be loading up again. And from this point, we can just fairly easy play further. I think it's just absolutely great just to see how fast everything works, even on this cheap as a non-brand SD card, and the rumble function is quite aggressive. So if the game supports rumble, because that's one of the things you need to take consideration, this seems to be working fine. But of course, the rumble function only works with a certain kind of emulator, because games that had never rumble function before, that doesn't work either. However, so if you're going to be looking into some other stuff like a Nintendo DS and stuff like that, there is so much actually, you can just play with this. It's absolutely nuts. And this way we can just fairly easy boot into games. So, but let's do a little bit of a D-pad fetish moment to see what is going on with this. Can we actually play some fighting games? I'm really curious. So let's do a little bit of a gameplay. Shoryuken. Yep, Shoryuken is just great. I do need to get used to the D-pad because it's the long travel, but not in a bad way. So if you're going to be looking at the back buttons over here, they have been placed in a very nice position. I'm not like the biggest fan of these back buttons. I'm normally not using it. I'm more like a guy that loves to use the front-facing buttons. But again, that's more like a personal preference when it comes to that. But for fighting games, this is absolutely a great freaking D-pad. So when it comes to the back buttons of this particular device, I must say that they did a great job. It's a quite interesting evolution when it comes to all these devices reviewed here on the channel. You can actually see that the positioning of the buttons are nice. You can just put your fingers actually like on the buttons and don't really notice them they're there. And I mean particularly when you're going to be having the mechanism, the resistance is just the right amount, to the point if you're going to be putting your fingers on here, you're not going to be accidentally like pressing the button. And that is something they sometimes do mess up. And with this particular Pro model, it's great. So moving on to some two-dimensional stuff with some 60-bit or actually 32-bits with the Sega 32X. So nowadays we do see the Sega 32X more often on these cheaper devices. But let's just try a different, completely crazy game. And also this is going to be very important for the D-pad, because it's more like having the same kind of moveset of the Street Fighter franchise. So when it comes to this, I must say that I am very pleased with the overall results when it comes to the device. We're still using the same kind of set, so we're also having over here the quick quote, quick save situation. With the screenshot, we can restart the game if you want to. We can just go back in here, we can just go into the loading situation. And so far I didn't have any problems when it comes to the quick load, quick save option, when it comes to the normal emulators. So what I actually wanted to do is see what happens if we're going to be using the RetroArch core, but also going back to the PlayStation 1. Yep, some PlayStation 1 with this particular core, or the RetroArch itself. We don't have the audio delay whatsoever. I didn't really notice it at all when it comes to the Colin McRae, or at least I didn't find it really annoying at this point. So particularly when it comes to certain games like Tekken, you do notice it very quickly because of the fighting, of course, the noises they make when you actually be going into some fighting moves and stuff like that. But performance-wise, this is just great. However, if you're going to be pressing the button, we can make a quick save over here, but I don't find it really convenient. You need to choose a certain point. So let's say we're having save slot 0. And it does work quite well. So let's try to load it up. You can see that works quite quickly. So what you're going to be doing is setting to a certain point. So let's say we're having quick load, quick save. But you need to remember. And with the other menu, what I loved about it, that we're having the quick, let's say the screenshot. So that makes it easier to actually see what was going on at the time, at the moment. But how about when going to be playing some PlayStation Portable? This is one of those systems that struggle on these, let's say, cheaper devices. But I don't want to be all negative, because you can actually play it. Of course, the screen is not going to be the best screen ever for games like this, because of the resolution of the screen in combination with the original one for PlayStation Portable. But you can already see some minor hiccups. If you're going to be deep diving into the menu, you will find you can set up some stuff like having different resolutions or shutting down some filters. But yeah, when it comes to three-dimensional games, it's going to be always a little bit of a problem when it comes to that. But it is playable to a certain point. So this is what I actually mean. So having over here, that's kind of weird, having the resolution set to 2 times. So it's going to be absolutely weird that they went for this, because with the original resolution, this is going to be displayed so much smoother when it comes to that. So sometimes you just need to mess around with the settings to see how to get the best result there. Sometimes there's still a little bit of wiggly room when it comes to performance boost. Let's try some N64, and yeah, I've been reviewing too many of these devices knowing what's going on with it and what's coming. So you can actually see that it will struggle. With some games, there's a situation that is more debatable, is it going to be playing for you? Because with stutters, sometimes I don't really find it too annoying. It's absolutely crazy to see that we can actually play some N64 now, because this was absolutely something that wasn't happening, let's say, many years before. Like with the first generation devices. So let's see if everything has been mapped like it's supposed to be. So, nah, okay, there we go. So with this particular model, we do have like 2 joysticks. Some have none of them, no joysticks at all. But now we can actually play the games like supposed to be. But I do notice, like, is this... Oh, yeah, I messed up. The point is that I do have like this weird thing going on. So let's try that again when it comes to, let's say, some gameplay. Because I did notice that there was something weird going on with the joystick. Let's see if they messed it up or... No, it was more like an idea in my head. No, that seems to be working fine. But you can see going through the game, this seems to be working just fine as it is. But again, if you're going to be doing a deep dive into certain, let's say, games, you will find more demanding, like GoldenEye and stuff like that, don't work. Or at all, or like too many stutters. Dreamcast is another cool device that we can just play with the handhelds, but you can see with the emulator we still have some weird shenanigans going on with some glitches, and that is one of the things you will find a lot on these devices, so that's quite unfortunate. So it is not going to be the ultimate perfect emulation experience. We do have like better devices that cost a little bit more, and you do have like overall better performance. The rumble motor is active through RetroArch, so that's cool. D-pad is activated, but also the analog stick. But so far, I can see this seems to be working just fine. And the same situation we have with N64, plays portable. We have stutters, we have limitations. But is it forgivable? Will it destroy the complete fun of the gaming? I think sometimes it's forgivable. Ah, crap, there goes my freaking rock. No! 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 You know, I always kind of hate the Atomic Wave because the audio is like freaking 10 times the normal. But emulation performance is absolutely interesting to see that we can actually play this particular game now with many others. Because Atomic Wave is such an interesting device, but also quite demanding. We have seen all kinds of cheap game boxes that have so many problems. Let's crank up the volume a little bit more. So where it is a little bit stuttering in the beginning, I must say that I'm quite surprised with the overall performance. Same situation with all the other ones, plays portable Dreamcast. It's going to be sometimes a hit or miss, but I think it's cool to actually see these games playing on native resolution. Man, this game is so chaos. Metal Slug with riding a dolphin, and can get more wicked than this. But it's absolutely interesting to see that we can actually play this. You know, it's cool to see that we can play Sega Saturn now on a budget device, because that's what we're going to be playing on. So many years ago we didn't have any option what's going on when playing Sega Saturn on game boxes. And now we can just play it on a very cheap device from Anbernic. And you can see that with two-dimensional games, the overall performance is quite enjoyable. And again, it's going to be a hit or miss in, let's say, when you're going to be going through the game. So more demanding three-dimensional games will be more difficult to emulate. But yeah, performance-wise, I think there's nothing much to complain actually here. But in this case, I don't want to focus too much on, let's say, the basic games, because all of them will run just fine. For example, if you want to just play some old school Wolfenstein, yep, we can actually just play this. And with the D-pad, the analog stick is completely unplayable. Whee! Turbo Wolfenstein! But if you're going to be playing like this, it's just going to be enjoyable and fun. No audio delay whatsoever. Absolutely classic one. So it runs through a RetroArch, so what you can do is actually go here, go back, and we can just shut it down. Yep. So the HDMI solution, I think it's such a great thing that we have this on cheaper devices now. And this works plug and play. You can just plug it in the menu, that's something I need to say, and this way we can just fairly easy just play games on the go. How freaking cool is that? But when it comes to the non-RetroArch list, we do have widescreen shenanigans. Yup, that is something that is going on over here. So that's quite unfortunate. So let's press the button. There is nothing much we can actually do with aspect ratio. That is quite unfortunate. So if you're going to be playing through, let's say, the certain kind of, let's say, emulators, that is not going to be having a 4:3 aspect ratio. So that makes me wonder, what can we actually do when it comes to the RetroArch? So that's something I'm going to be trying out later on. So with the fast, let's go with the HD. Yeah, this is more like a smoothing filter. Nope, putting it on high speed. But yeah, so far, emulation performance is just great. I already mentioned before, like the old school 8-bit 16, but if you're searching a device for this basic stuff like 8-bit 16-bit, this is just going to be great. But through the RetroArch, we're going to be having a bezel implemented from the start. We can shut it off if you don't want to have a bezel, just aspect ratio. I think that's going to be the more convenient part about the RetroArch, let's say, situation. Out of the box, this is such an overall better situation. And yeah, this is going to be still widescreen craziness. But the on-screen overlay and everything can be shut down if you don't want to actually have that. So that's just great, and yeah, I think it's going to be an option if you want to play through both of these, like say, options. Both have the positive and the negative side. But emulation wise, I just wanted to play some Super Famicom. Yeah, this works great. Let's see if they also used the analog stick. Yep, they actually used that too. So if you want to play through there. So for overall emulation performance, this is nothing really to complain about. I think this, if you just want to play some old school 8-bit, 16-bit and a little bit of an, let's say, 32-bit or like PlayStation 1 and stuff like that, it seems to be playable. So that's cool, man. So if you want to disable this, let's plug it out. Just wanted to showcase what's actually going to be happening, and that is nothing. And I think that is the general problem if you're going to be plugging it in. If you're going to be saying, hey, I want to get out of the game, first shut it down. Then we're going to be getting into the main menu, and then I can actually like remove the cable here. And also, if everything goes like it planned, it will go back to the menu, which you can see. But you cannot really do that in the game itself. The RG35XX Pro, yeah, what's actually Pro about it? Yeah, that's kind of confusing with all the different models they've released. We do have an extra joystick, so that's great. However, if you're going to be playing some games for the 8-bit, 16-bit era or some handheld stuff, yeah, this is just going to be great when it comes to the menu itself. They're going to be maybe in different firmware with more options and better overall, let's say, gaming experience. The way how this works, I must say that I'm quite surprised. Beautiful display, good audio. So there are some, let's say, problems that we've seen before with the software, but it's still kind of weird that they went for this out of the box. Thank you all for watching. Consider subscribing, and it would be great to see you in the next video.